You've been praised for being nice your entire life. You've been told that kindness is virtue, that putting others first is noble, that swallowing your words is maturity. But what if I told you that your niceness isn't kindness at all? What if it's the most sophisticated form of self-abandonment you've ever constructed? What if being nice all the time is just your way of hiding from the terrifying truth of who you actually are and what you actually want? Let's talk about something nobody wants to admit. The performance of niceness, the mask you wear so well that you've forgotten there's a face underneath. There's this moment that happens to people, usually in their 30s or 40s, sometimes earlier if they're lucky. It's the moment when they realize they've spent decades being who everyone needed them to be, and they have absolutely no idea who they are when nobody's watching. They look in the mirror and see a stranger, a pleasant stranger, an agreeable stranger, but a stranger nonetheless. This isn't about being cruel. This isn't permission to become an asshole. This is about understanding that there's a difference between genuine kindness and the chronic self-erasure that masquerades as virtue. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you said what you actually thought? Not what you thought someone wanted to hear. Not the diplomatic version. Not the filtered, appropriate, socially acceptable version. When did you last speak from that raw, unpolished place inside you that has opinions, desires, anger, hunger? If you're struggling to remember, you're not alone. You're just well-trained. We live in a culture that teaches us, especially from childhood, that our needs are somehow selfish, that wanting things is immature, that expressing displeasure makes us difficult, that boundaries are mean. So we learn to smile when we're screaming inside. We learn to say yes when everything in us is howling no. We learn to be nice, and we call this growth. We call this emotional intelligence. We call this being a good person. But here's what we don't talk about. Every time you swallow your truth to keep the peace, you're not being kind to the other person. You're lying to them. You're giving them a false version of reality where you don't exist as a full human being with needs, limits, and authentic responses. You're training them to interact with a puppet, not a person. And worse, you're lying to yourself. The philosophy of hedonism, which most people misunderstand entirely, isn't about mindless pleasure-seeking or selfish indulgence. The ancient hedonists, particularly Epicurus, understood something profound about human nature. They understood that genuine pleasure, the kind that actually nourishes your soul, comes from living in alignment with your true nature, not from performing a role. Not from self-denial for the sake of others' comfort, but from the deep satisfaction of being authentic. Epicurus said that the greatest wealth is self-sufficiency, and you cannot be self-sufficient if you don't even know what yourself wants, needs, or feels, because you've spent your entire life editing those things out of existence. Think about it this way. When you're always nice, always accommodating, always flexible, always understanding, you're essentially telling the universe that you don't matter. You're saying that everyone else's comfort, everyone else's needs, everyone else's reality is more important than yours. You're volunteering to be invisible, and the universe believes you. People will take exactly what you offer. If you offer a doormat, they'll wipe their feet. Not because they're bad people, but because you've taught them that's what you're for. You've shown them through years of consistent behavior that your role in their life is to absorb, accommodate, and adjust. Why would they question that? You never did. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Being nice all the time is often a trauma response. It's a survival strategy you developed when being yourself felt dangerous. Maybe in childhood, your authentic expressions were met with anger, withdrawal, or punishment. Maybe you learned that love was conditional on your compliance. Maybe you discovered that the only way to be accepted was to have no needs of your own, so you became nice, not kind. Nice. There's a difference. Kindness comes from abundance. It's a choice made from a place of fullness. You're kind because you want to be, because you have something genuine to give, because generosity flows naturally from your own well-being. Niceness comes from fear. It's a strategy, a defense mechanism, a way to prevent rejection, conflict, or abandonment. You're nice because you're terrified of what happens if you're not. Kindness says, I see you, I care about you, and I choose to support you. Niceness says, please don't hurt me, please don't leave me, please don't be angry with me. I'll be whatever you need me to be. Can you feel the difference? One comes from power. the other from powerlessness. Nietzsche had something sharp to say about this. He talked about the herd mentality, the way people surrender their individuality to belong to the group. He saw how society trains people to suppress their vital instincts, their authentic desires, their will to power, which he didn't mean as domination over others, but as the fundamental drive to express your true nature fully and unapologetically. When you're chronically nice, you're participating in what Nietzsche would call slave morality. You've internalized the idea that self-denial is virtuous, that suffering in silence is noble, that sacrificing your truth is what good people do. You've made a virtue out of your own diminishment. And if this is landing somewhere deep in your chest, if you're starting to see the pattern, maybe it's worth staying here with us. We go into these places every week, the uncomfortable places, the real places. You know what to do. Let's go deeper into what you're actually avoiding when you're being nice all the time. You're avoiding conflict, obviously. But conflict isn't the enemy you think it is. Conflict is just what happens when two realities meet. It's information. It's the friction that reveals where you end and someone else begins. Without conflict, without that friction, you never develop a clear sense of your own boundaries, your own shape, your own substance. When you avoid all conflict through chronic niceness, you're essentially refusing to be a separate person. You're saying, I'd rather merge, blur, disappear than risk the discomfort of being distinct from you. I'd rather be amorphous than known. And you can live like that for years, decades even. Floating through life is a pleasant fog, never quite solid, never quite there. People will like you. They'll say, you're so easy to be around, so low maintenance, so sweet, and you'll feel empty. You'll feel like you're watching your life through glass. You'll feel like you're not really here, because you're not, you're in hiding. You're also avoiding your own desires. This is crucial. Desire is dangerous. Desire is specific. Desire says, I want this, not that. I prefer this person, this experience, this direction. Desire forces you to make choices, to prioritize, to potentially disappoint people, to risk rejection. So you've learned to want nothing, or to want only what's convenient for others. You've learned to say, I don't mind and whatever you prefer, and I'm flexible so many times that you've actually convinced yourself you have no preferences. You've amputated your desires to fit into smaller and smaller spaces, but your desires don't disappear. They just go underground. They become resentment, passive aggression, depression, anxiety, mysterious illnesses, inexplicably your body keeps the score, as they say. Your body knows you're lying, even when your conscious mind has bought the story. And here's what's truly insidious about this pattern. When you've spent years, maybe your whole life, disconnecting from your own desires, you lose the ability to experience pleasure, real pleasure, not the numbing kind, not the escape kind, but the deep, nourishing pleasure that comes from satisfying an authentic need, from expressing your true nature, from living in alignment with who you actually are. This is what the hedonists understood. Epicurus distinguished between natural and necessary pleasures, natural but unnecessary pleasures, and unnatural pleasures. The chronic nice person has lost touch with all of it. They don't know what they naturally need because they've been taught their needs are burdensome. They can't access unnecessary but delightful pleasures because that seems frivolous or selfish. And they often fall into unnatural pleasures, the addictive, compulsive kind, because they're so starved for any sensation that confirms they exist. You might be thinking, but what's the alternative? If I stop being nice, won't I hurt people? Won't I lose relationships? Won't I be alone? Maybe, but here's the question you need to ask yourself. Are you really connected to anyone right now? When people know only your pleasant mask, when they love only your accommodating persona, when they rely on your endless flexibility, are they actually in relationship with you? Or are they in relationship with your performance? Real intimacy requires truth. It requires you to be a real person with real boundaries, real needs, real opinions, real feelings. It requires you to risk being known, and yes, that means risking being rejected. But at least the rejection would be real. At least you'd know someone rejected you, not your mask. Right now, you might have 100 shallow connections, but you're profoundly alone. You're alone inside your own experience, isolated behind your niceness, watching everyone else live their lives while you manage the logistics of theirs. The path out of this isn't about becoming selfish, it's about becoming honest. It's about the slow, uncomfortable work of reconnecting with your authentic responses and learning to express them. It starts small. It starts with noticing. The next time someone asks what you want for dinner and you automatically say, "I don't care," pause. Actually check in with yourself. Is there something you want? Even a small preference? Even a tiny inclination? Can you find it? Can you say it out loud? The next time someone asks you to do something and your gut says no, but your mouth starts forming yes, stop. Feel that gap. Notice that moment where you were about to betray yourself. You don't have to change your answer yet. Just notice it. Notice how automatic the self-abandonment has become. The next time you're angry but smiling, sad but saying you're fine, disappointed but acting grateful, just acknowledge it to yourself. You don't have to perform authenticity before you're ready, but you can stop lying to yourself about what you're actually feeling. This is the work. It's not dramatic. It's not a single moment of liberation. It's 1,000 small moments of choosing truth over performance. It's learning that you can survive other people's disappointment. You can survive their anger. You can survive them not liking you. You can even survive them leaving. What you can't survive, not really, not with your soul intact, is continuing to live as a ghost in your own life. And if you're feeling that pull, that deep recognition, consider this your invitation to keep going with us. We don't do surface here. We go all the way down. You know where the subscribe button is. Let's talk about what happens when you start to wake up from chronic niceness. Because it's not pretty. Nobody tells you this part. There's a phase, and it can last months or even years, where you feel like the worst person alive. You start saying no to things, and you feel like a monster. You start expressing your actual opinions, and you feel aggressive, mean, too much. You start taking up space, and you feel selfish, demanding, narcissistic. This is normal. This is what happens when you've been compressed into nothing for so long. Your sense of normal is completely warped. What feels to you like being an asshole is probably just being a regular human being with boundaries and needs. What feels to you like demanding too much is probably asking for basic respect. What feels to you like being selfish is probably just existing as a person who matters. You'll lose people during this phase. You will. The ones who benefited from your self-erasure will not appreciate your new authenticity. They'll tell you you've changed, and not in a good way. They'll say they miss the old you. What they mean is, they miss the version of you that made their life easier. Let them go. This is the price of becoming real. Some relationships were built entirely on your willingness to be small. When you start taking up your actual space, those relationships crumble. They were never built to hold the real you anyway. But here's what else happens. You'll start attracting different people. People who actually want to know you, not use you. People who are interested in your thoughts, your feelings, your desires, not just your willingness to accommodate theirs. People who see your boundaries not as obstacles, but as the definition of who you are. You'll start experiencing pleasure differently. Food will taste different when you're actually present to eat it, when you chose it because you wanted it, not because it was easiest for everyone else. Rest will feel different when you're resting because you're tired, not because you've depleted yourself serving others. Joy will feel different when it's coming from authentic alignment, rather than from the relief of having successfully performed niceness one more time. You'll start to feel things more intensely. This can be disorienting. When you've been numbing yourself for years, when you've been suppressing your authentic responses, you've also been suppressing your capacity to feel. As you open that door, everything comes through. The anger you've been swallowing, the grief you've been postponing, the desire you've been denying, the vitality you've been containing, it's overwhelming. But it's also proof that you're alive, really alive, not just going through the motions of a life that looks acceptable from the outside. The ancient Stoics, who seem opposed to hedonism on the surface, actually understood something compatible with this journey. They talked about living according to nature, your nature, not the socialized, domesticated, niceness-performing version of you, but your actual nature. The Stoics believed that inner peace comes not from suppressing your nature, but from understanding it and expressing it virtuously. And here's the key. Virtue, for the Stoics, wasn't niceness. It was wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Notice what's on that list. Courage, the courage to be yourself. The courage to speak truth. The courage to stand in your own reality even when others pressure you to abandon it. That's virtue. That's the good life. Being nice all the time requires no courage. It's the path of least resistance. It's what everyone expects, what everyone rewards, what everyone prefers. It keeps systems running smoothly. It keeps other people comfortable. But it absolutely destroys you from the inside out. And the tragedy is that you're often not even conscious it's happening. You think you're being good. You think you're being mature. You think you're being loving. And in some ways, you are trying to love. But you're trying to love from an empty cup. You're trying to give from a depleted well. You're trying to be generous while simultaneously starving yourself. This is not sustainable. This is not noble. This is not the good life the philosophers were pointing toward, Epicurus said. If you wish to make someone wealthy, do not add to their possessions, but subtract from their desires. He was talking about simplicity, about finding satisfaction in what's natural and necessary, rather than chasing endless more. But there's another application here. If you wish to be truly content, truly at peace, truly alive, you cannot subtract from your own desires until there's nothing left. You cannot keep pruning yourself down to fit into other people's gardens. You cannot keep silencing your own voice to make room for everyone else's. That's not simplicity, that's self-annihilation. True contentment, the kind Epicurus pointed toward, comes from knowing yourself well enough to know what genuinely nourishes you, and then having the courage to pursue it. It comes from living in alignment with your actual nature, not the nature you've been told to have. This requires something the chronically nice person has systematically avoided: self-knowledge. You can't live authentically if you don't know who you are. And you can't know who you are if you've spent your entire life performing a role. So, the journey out of chronic niceness is also a journey into self-discovery. It's an archaeology of the self. You're excavating through layers of adaptation, accommodation, performance, trying to find the raw material underneath. Trying to find what you actually think, feel, want, need, believe when nobody's watching. When there's no audience to please, when there's no reward for being good. This is terrifying work, because you might not like what you find. You might discover you're angrier than you thought, more opinionated, more sexual, more ambitious, more selfish by society's standards, more difficult, more intense, more too much. And you'll have to decide, do I honor this, or do I rebury it and go back to being nice? If you're still here, if you're still tracking with this, you already know which choice you're leaning toward, and maybe this is your sign to commit to it fully. To go all in on becoming real. We're building something here for people who are done performing. Join us. The thing about desires, your real desires, is that they're often not what you've been taught to want. You've been sold a script about what you should desire. Success that looks a certain way, relationships that follow a certain trajectory, happiness that manifests through specific achievements and acquisitions. But your actual desires might be stranger than that. More specific, more unconventional, more you. Maybe you don't actually want the relationship everyone expects you to want. Maybe you don't want the career path that makes sense on paper. Maybe you don't want kids, or you do want them when everyone's telling you it's the wrong time. Maybe you want to live somewhere weird, do something risky, pursue something that makes no practical sense but lights up something inside you that's been dark for years. These desires feel dangerous because they're dangerous to your carefully constructed, acceptable life. They're dangerous to other people's expectations. They're dangerous to the story you've been telling yourself about who you are. But they're the only path to actual aliveness, to genuine pleasure, to the hedonistic good life, properly understood. Hedonism isn't about mindless consumption or selfish pleasure-seeking. It's about having the clarity to know what genuinely brings you deep, sustainable satisfaction, and the courage to pursue it even when it disappoints others, even when it doesn't make sense, even when it requires you to be difficult, inconvenient, too much. It's about choosing your own suffering. Because you will suffer either way. You'll suffer the pain of self-betrayal and slow death of chronic niceness, or you'll suffer the pain of authenticity, of conflict, of disappointing people, of being misunderstood. But only one of those forms of suffering is generative. Only one leads to actual life. Nietzsche put it this way: the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. Owning yourself, that's what we're talking about. That's what chronic niceness prevents. You've leased yourself out to everyone else's needs, everyone else's comfort, everyone else's vision of who you should be, and the rent you're paying is your life. Your actual, irreplaceable, finite life. Is the approval worth it? Is the false peace worth it? Is the performance worth it? You already know the answer. You've known it for a while now. That's why this is landing. That's why you're still here, still listening, still feeling that uncomfortable recognition in your chest. The question is, what are you going to do with this knowing? Because knowing changes nothing if you don't act. You can have this realization 100 times and still default back to chronic niceness the moment someone asks something of you. The pattern is that deep. The programming is that strong. Change requires practice. Daily, moment-by-moment practice of choosing differently, of catching yourself in the act of self-betrayal and choosing truth instead, of feeling the fear of disapproval and speaking your mind anyway, of wanting to say yes but saying no because no is the truth, of wanting to smile and nod but expressing disagreement because disagreement is real. It requires you to become comfortable with other people's discomfort. This might be the hardest part. You've spent your life managing other people's emotional states, trying to keep everyone happy, trying to prevent any negative feelings from arising. You've made yourself responsible for everyone's emotional experience. But you're not responsible for that. You can't be. Each person's emotional experience is their own. Their disappointment is theirs. Their anger is theirs. Their sadness is theirs. You can have compassion for it without fixing it. You can care without caretaking. You can love without self-abandonment. This distinction is everything. This is the difference between kindness and niceness. Kindness allows others to have their feelings. Niceness tries to prevent them from having feelings. Kindness respects others as full human beings capable of handling reality. Niceness treats others as fragile children who need to be protected from truth. When you start being honest instead of nice, people will have feelings. They'll be disappointed. They'll be frustrated. They'll be confused. They might be angry. Let them. Those feelings are information for them. They're part of their growth, their learning, their journey. Your job isn't to prevent their feelings. Your job is to be real. And here's what's wild. When you start being real, you give other people permission to be real too. Your authenticity creates space for theirs. Your boundaries teach them about boundaries. Your self-honoring shows them self-honoring is possible. You become a mirror in which they can see their own imprisoned authenticity. Some people won't take that opportunity. They'll stay committed to the performance. They'll judge you for leaving it. They'll call you selfish for owning yourself. Let them. Their judgment is about their fear, not your truth. But some people will wake up. Some people will see you living differently and think, maybe I could too. Maybe I could stop performing. Maybe I could be real. Maybe I could want things. Maybe I could say no. Maybe I could exist as a full person instead of a convenient supporting character in everyone else's story. You might save someone's life just by saving your own. You might give someone permission to be themselves just by claiming that permission for yourself. This is the ripple effect of authenticity. This is what's at stake. Not just your life, but the possibility of waking others from the same nightmare you've been living. And if this feels like a mission worth pursuing, if this feels like work worth doing, then stay close. This is what we explore here every single time. The path from performance to presence, from niceness to truth, from hiding to being. The button's right there. So, where does this leave us? You've spent maybe 30 minutes now confronting something you've probably felt for years but couldn't quite name. The exhaustion of chronic niceness, the suffocation of endless accommodation,